Ambassador J1 stood before the Galactic Council chamber and felt the familiar weight of humiliation settling on his shoulders. He had been doing this job for 12 years now, and every single time felt worse than the last. The chamber was massive, designed to make smaller species feel insignificant. Hundreds of alien representatives sat in their elevated seats, looking down at the speaking platform where J1 stood alone. He carried a data tablet containing evidence. Good evidence. The kind that would hold up in any legitimate court. Video footage, mineral analysis, testimony from witnesses. All of it proved that Velkari mining ships had illegally entered human-protected space and stripped 3 asteroid fields that belonged to human colonies. 53 people had died when the Velkari destroyed a research station that got in their way. J1 pressed the button to begin his presentation. The holographic display showed the footage clearly. The Velkari ships marked with their corporate symbols, firing on unarmed civilians. The destruction of the station. The crying families of the dead. The council speaker. A creature named Threnavel, who looked like a giant insect made of silver metal, barely glanced at the evidence. His compound eyes reflected the light in a way that seemed deliberately dismissive. He clicked his mandibles together, which his species did when they were bored. Ambassador J1 Threnavel said in that resonating voice that filled the chamber, "The Council has reviewed your complaint. We find it to be another example of humanity's primitive territorial instincts. Your species has only been traveling in space for 200 years. You must learn that the galaxy does not operate on your limited understanding of property rights." J1 felt his jaw clench. He had heard variations of this speech 16 times before. 16 separate incidents. 16 times he had brought evidence. 16 times the council had dismissed it. The Velkari representative, a blob-like creature named Vorthan, actually laughed. The sound bubbled through his translation device. "The humans and their chemical rockets," Vorthan said, his body rippling with amusement. "Perhaps when you develop real technology, you will understand how resource allocation works in civilized space." Several other council members joined in the laughter. J1 stood there, holding his tablet with white knuckles, saying nothing. What was there to say? He had already said everything. He had pleaded, argued, presented facts, appealed to law, appealed to morality, appealed to basic decency. None of it mattered. Above the planet, orbiting the council station, Commander Hannah sat in the command chair of the EDS Vigilant. She watched the proceedings through a live feed, her dark eyes fixed on the screen. Her crew moved quietly around her, but she could feel their anger. They all felt it. 3 years stationed here, watching this happen over and over again. "Commander," her communications officer said quietly. "The vote is about to start." Hannah nodded. She already knew how it would go. The vote was theater. The council had made their decision before J1 even started talking. On the screen, Threnavel called for the vote. All those in favor of tabling this matter for further review? 47 hands, claws, tentacles, and appendages rose into the air, only to vote it against. The same 2 who always voted against, 2 minor species who had also been ignored by the council for decades. "The matter is tabled," Threnavel announced. Next item on the agenda. J1 gathered his tablet. He bowed slightly, keeping his face neutral, and walked out of the chamber. No one stopped him. No one apologized. No one even looked at him anymore. He was already forgotten. That night, J1 sat in his small apartment in the human diplomatic sector. The building was quiet. Most of the staff had already gone to sleep. He pulled up his secure communication terminal and began typing a message directly to Earth's Ministry of External Affairs. The message was simple and direct. He explained what had happened, though they would already know. He listed the previous 16 incidents. He noted the casualty count, which now totaled 53 deaths and hundreds injured. Then he made his recommendation. "They do not respect words," he wrote. "They do not respect evidence. They do not respect law. They respect nothing we have offered them through diplomatic channels. I recommend immediate withdrawal of all human diplomatic personnel from Galactic Council space. No explanation. No negotiation. Just leave." Perhaps they will respect silence, since they do not respect anything else we have given them. He stared at the message for a long time before sending it. This was not how he had imagined his career would go. He had studied alien cultures for 20 years. He had learned 8 different languages. He had dedicated his life to the idea that different species could understand each other, could find common ground, could build something together. But you cannot build with people who think you are not worth listening to. He sent the message. 72 hours later, every human embassy in Galactic Council space received the same order. Pack everything. Delete all files. Disconnect all systems. Leave nothing behind. And do it quietly. Commander Hannah received her orders at 0600 hours. All human vessels are to depart Council space immediately. No communications with Council authorities. No explanations. Execute immediately. She smiled for the first time in months. You heard the orders, she told her crew. Spin up the drives. We are going home. Across the galaxy in 47 different systems, human diplomats packed their bags. They erased their computers. They locked their doors and walked away. Some of the alien staff members who worked in the embassies arrived to find empty buildings. Furniture remained. The buildings were clean and maintained. But every human was simply gone at the Galactic Council's central station. Threneville received the first reports with confusion. What do you mean the human embassy is empty? He asked his assistant. They are all gone, Speaker. Every human? They left during the night. No message. No forwarding information. Just empty buildings. Threneville clicked his mandibles in irritation. Probably embarrassed by yesterday's vote. They will return when they remember their place. But deeper in the station, in the security offices, alarms were starting to go off. Someone had accessed the Council's main computer networks during the night. Thousands of files had been copied. Security protocols had been quietly disabled and then re-enabled. Surveillance systems had gaps in their recordings. The human diplomats had not just left, they had taken information with them. Everything they needed, and in the Kepler sector, where Valkyrie mining operations had been running for months in what they claimed was unclaimed space. The miners were about to learn that silence could be more terrifying than any diplomatic protest. The war had not started yet, but diplomacy had definitely ended, and humanity had spent 50 years learning everything they needed to know. 3 months passed since the humans disappeared from Galactic Council space. At first, the Council barely noticed. Threneville made a public statement saying that humanity had finally accepted their minor role in galactic civilization. Several representatives applauded. The Valkyrie delegate sent a celebratory message to his corporate headquarters, saying that the annoying human complaints would finally stop. But then the reports started coming in. The Kepler sector. Mining operation went dark on day 73. Valkyrie Corporate sent 3 messages asking for status updates. All 3 went unanswered. They sent a supply ship to investigate. The ship arrived in the sector and found nothing but empty space where the mining platforms should have been. Not destroyed. Not damaged. Just gone. The supply ship captain sent increasingly panicked messages. The mining platforms are not here. The refineries are not here. The transport vessels are not here. Everything is gone. There is no debris. There is no wreckage. It is like they never existed. Valkyrie Corporate sent a full investigation team with military escort. What they found was worse than destruction. Every piece of equipment had been carefully disassembled down to the molecular level. Millions of credits worth of mining machinery reduced to sorted piles of basic elements. Iron here, silicon there, rare metals in neat containers. The work had been precise, almost surgical. The 300 Valkyrie miners were found on an uninhabited moon 2 systems away. They were alive and unharmed, sitting in a camp with food and water, but they had no equipment. No tools, no weapons, no communication devices. Not even their clothes synthesizers. They sat wrapped in emergency blankets made from local plant fibers. On the ground next to the camp, written in perfect Valkyrie script using polished stones, was a simple message. Trespassing. Leave. No signature. No explanation. Just those two words. The story spread through the council like fire. Species that had ignored human complaints suddenly wanted to know where their borders actually were. Mining corporations quietly reviewed their operations. Trade ships started checking their routes more carefully. In the council chambers, Krell stood up to speak. He was an amphibian species, known for being practical and careful. His green skin glistened under the chamber lights as he addressed the assembly. "Has anyone actually contacted humanity recently?" he asked. Not sent a message. Actually contacted them. Received a response. Silence filled the chamber. Threneval shifted in his seat uncomfortably. "The humans withdrew from diplomatic relations," he said. "They made their choice." "That is not what I asked," Krell said firmly. "Has anyone tried to reach them? Anyone at all?" More silence. Then one of the junior representatives spoke up. "We sent 3 messages to Earth's government. None were answered. We sent messages to their colonies. Also no answer. We tried to contact their trade vessels. The communication channels simply do not connect. It is not that they refuse to talk. It is that the channels are completely offline."
Oh?
Krell sat down slowly. "So we do not actually know what they are doing," he said quietly. "We only know what they are not doing. They are not talking to us." Dr. Minji worked in the Xenanthropology department at Council Central University. She was the last human academic left on the station. She had stayed behind to finish a research project on ancient Velkari culture. For weeks after the diplomatic withdrawal, nothing changed in her daily routine. She taught her classes. She worked in the library. She ate lunch with her colleagues. Then one day, 3 of those colleagues came to her office. They looked nervous. Dr. Mingi, one of them, said, "Can you explain what is happening? Why did your people leave? Why did they not say anything?" Minji looked at them for a long moment. She had worked with these people for 8 years. They had been friendly. They had been professional. They had also sat silently in faculty meetings when she had been talked over, ignored, or dismissed because of her species. "We tried diplomacy for 50 years, she said calmly. "You laughed at us for 50 years. We presented evidence. We followed your rules. We asked nicely. We asked firmly. We asked desperately. None of it mattered. So we stopped asking." "But you cannot just leave," one colleague protested. "What about cooperation? What about academic exchange? What about everything we have built together?" Minji started packing her desk. "You built nothing with us? You allowed us to work in your buildings while treating our concerns as jokes. That is not cooperation. That is tolerance at best." She placed her books in a box. "I am done explaining myself to people who never listened." "Where will you go?" they asked. "Home," she said simply. "Where people actually want us." She left the next morning on the last human transport scheduled to leave the station. The transport was full of human civilians, students, workers, and researchers who had all received the same quiet message: time to come home, in Earth's orbital command center. Captain Heian reviewed the latest intelligence reports. His team had spent 50 years mapping every system in Council space. Not just the human-accessible areas, everything. Every military installation, every communication relay, every trade route, every manufacturing center, every power generation facility. They had done it quietly while the diplomats talked and while the council laughed. Human ships were primitive, the council had said. Chemical rockets, they had mocked. What they had not noticed was that those primitive ships had been everywhere, recording everything, learning everything. Hune pulled up a tactical display. Red dots marked council military assets. Blue lines showed trade routes. Green markers indicated communication nodes. Yellow highlighted manufacturing. The display looked like a 3-dimensional spider web spanning hundreds of star systems. "We know everything about them," his intelligence officer said. "Ship movements, patrol schedules, response times, command structures. We have been watching them while they ignored us." Hugh nodded slowly. "And they know almost nothing about us," he said. "They never bothered to look." In the Galactic Council Security Division, alarms were finally getting attention. A young analyst named Torvin had been reviewing the security breach from 3 months ago. The breach that happened the night the humans left. "Sir," he said to his supervisor, "this is worse than we thought. They did not just copy files. They took everything. Diplomatic communications, military readiness reports, economic data, security protocols, fleet positions, even personal communications between council members." The supervisor's face went pale. "Everything?" "Everything," Torvin confirmed. "And they covered their tracks so well that we did not even know they were in the system. The breach was only detected because they allowed it to be detected. They left just enough evidence to let us know it happened." The supervisor sat down heavily. Why would they do that? Torvin looked at his screen, at the massive list of accessed files. "I think they wanted us to know," he said quietly. "I think this is a message." The message was clear. We were watching the whole time. We were learning the whole time. We were preparing the whole time. And you never noticed because you never thought we mattered. Across the galaxy, humanity was not at war. They were not making threats. They were not issuing demands. They were simply absent. And that absence was starting to feel like a void that was pulling everything into chaos. The Galactic Council had maintained order for thousands of years, but much of that order had depended on humanity's endless patience. Their willingness to absorb insults, their commitment to diplomatic solutions, even when those solutions never came. Now that patience was gone, and the Council was beginning to understand what they had lost. The Valkyrie. Corporate Collective made their first major mistake 6 months after the humans went silent. Emboldened by what they thought was human weakness, they decided to expand their operations into the Drakon sovereignty's territory. The Drakons were a warrior species, proud and strong, but their military was small. The Valkyrie thought it would be an easy expansion. They were wrong. The Valkyrie sent a fleet of 30 warships along with their mining vessels. The Drakon Defense Force consisted of only 8 ships. The battle should have been over in minutes. Instead, 18 human vessels appeared from nowhere, led by Admiral Taeyang aboard the ISS Indomitable. The humans did not broadcast warnings. They did not make demands. They did not try to negotiate. They simply opened fire with a precision that shocked everyone watching. The battle lasted 17 minutes. When it was over, 23 Valkyrie warships were disabled. Their weapon systems surgically destroyed, but their life support intact. The remaining 7 ships fled. Not a single human or Drakon vessel was lost. Admiral Taeyang sent one message to the retreating Valkyrie fleet. "You have 6 hours to evacuate this sector. We will not repeat ourselves." The Valkyrie evacuated in 4 hours. The news spread across the galaxy in hours. The humans had not just defended an ally. They had an ally. A mutual defense pact with the Drakons that apparently no one knew about. How many other agreements did they have? How many other species had quietly signed treaties with humanity while the Council was not paying attention? Krell tried to find out. He sent messages to 20 different species, asking if they had diplomatic relations with humanity. 12 never responded. 5 said they had no comment. 3 admitted to having trade agreements with human colonies. None would provide details. The galaxy that the Council thought it understood was changing into something they did not recognize. Krell decided to take a risk. He personally traveled to the edge of human space and requested permission to speak with Earth's government. He waited 3 days for a response. When it came, he was granted a meeting with Minister Yunji, who headed what remained of humanity's extraterrestrial affairs department. The meeting took place via holographic communication. Minister Yunji appeared in the display, a woman in her 50s with gray hair and tired eyes. She looked at Krell without warmth, but without hostility either. "Minister Yunji," Krell began carefully, "I am here representing myself, not the Council as a whole. I believe mistakes were made. I believe we need to talk." "Mistakes," Yunji repeated. The words seemed to amuse her in a dark way. "Is that what you call it?" "I know that human grievances were not properly addressed," Krell said. "I voted against tabling your petitions every time. I tried to get others to listen. I failed. but I am trying now. Yoonji leaned back in her chair. You voted the right way 16 times, she said. That is more than most. But 16 votes did not save 53 lives. 16 votes did not stop the raids on our colonies. 16 votes did not make anyone take us seriously. What do you want? Krell asked. Reparations? Apologies? Changes to council procedures? We want you to leave us alone, Yoonji said simply. That is all. We tried to work within your system. Your system does not work for us, so we left. Now we are building something different. But the instability, Krell protested. The violence. Without dialogue, without cooperation, species will go to war. Yoonji's eyes hardened. We are not responsible for the galaxy's stability. You've built this system. You made the rules. You decided who mattered and who did not. We were told for 50 years that we did not matter. Fine, we accept that. But if we do not matter, then your problems do not matter to us either. That is not fair, Krell said. Yoonji agreed. It is not fair. Just like it was not fair when our people died and you did nothing. Just like it was not fair when we brought evidence and you laughed. Just like it was not fair when we followed every rule and still got ignored. You are right. It is not fair. Welcome to how we felt for 50 years. The call ended. Krell sat in his ship, staring at the blank display. He had failed, but he had also learned something important. The humans were not angry. Angry would have been easier to deal with. They were done. They had moved on. And somehow, that was more frightening than any threat. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Sang-woo and his team were doing work that no one was supposed to know about. They were the reason Council military communications kept failing at critical moments. They were the reason trade routes suddenly became dangerous. They were the reason security systems malfunctioned in convenient ways. Sang-woo's team consisted of 12 people. Just 12. But they had been trained by the best intelligence services humanity had developed. And they had access to all the security protocols that had been copied during the diplomatic withdrawal. They did not destroy things. Destruction would be noticed, investigated, defended against. Instead, they created small problems. A communication relay that worked perfectly 90% of the time, but failed during emergencies. A navigation system that was accurate except in certain conditions. A security camera that had blind spots that no one noticed until it was too late. We are not trying to hurt them, Sang-woo explained to his newest team member, a young woman named Hae-won. We are just making their lives difficult. Making them understand that the galaxy is more complicated when they actually have to pay attention. But is this not dishonorable? Hae-won asked. Fighting without declaring war? Sang-woo shook his head. We tried honor. We tried following rules. We tried being honest and open. They used all of that against us. So now we do what works. And what works is making them nervous without giving them a clear target to shoot at. In council space, species that had treated humanity poorly were discovering that their normal operations had become mysteriously difficult. Shipments got delayed. Communications got lost. Security got breached. Nothing catastrophic. Nothing that could be clearly blamed on anyone. Just a steady increase in problems that made life harder. But species that had shown humanity even basic respect found the opposite. Their trade routes were safe. Their communications were clear. Their security was solid. They received quiet offers of technology exchange and mutual defense pacts from human representatives who peered without going through council channels. The message was clear without being spoken. Humanity remembers who was decent and who was not. President Dong-haen stood before the inaugural assembly of what humanity was calling the Independent Systems Coalition. 47 species had sent representatives. Most were minor species that the council had ignored for decades. Some were former council members who had quit in frustration. A few were larger powers who saw opportunity in something new. We are not here to replace the Galactic Council, Dong-haen said. We are here to build an alternative. A system based on actual respect, actual enforcement of agreements, and actual consequences for violations. If you break a treaty, there will be immediate action. No debates. No committees. No tabling for later review. Just consequences. The representatives listened carefully. This was different from the Council's endless discussions and procedures. We do not require you to abandon your Council membership, Dong Han continued. We only require that you take this coalition seriously. We will not compete for your attention. Either you are here as partners, or you are not here at all. The speech was broadcast across the galaxy. Krell watched it from his office and felt something close to despair. This was not a negotiation. This was not a threat. This was humanity simply building something new and inviting others to join them. The Council had not just lost humanity's participation. They had lost their monopoly on galactic governance, and they had no idea how to get it back. The Galactic Council held an emergency session 8 months after humanity's withdrawal. Only half the usual representatives attended. Some species were too afraid to travel. Others had quietly begun negotiating with humanity's new coalition. A few had simply stopped paying attention to the Council altogether. Threneval looked across the half-empty chamber and tried to maintain his authority. His silver carapace seemed duller than before. His mandibles clicked nervously instead of dismissively. "We need to address the human situation," he said. "The instability they have caused threatens the entire galactic order." Krell stood up, his green skin darker than usual. "The instability we caused," he corrected. "We ignored their legitimate concerns. We mocked their technology. We dismissed their evidence. We let their people die. They did not create this situation. We did. That is irrelevant, Vorthon," the Velkari representative said, though his voice lacked its previous confidence. "We need them back at the table. We need to restore order." "How do you negotiate with someone who stopped talking?" another representative asked. "We have sent dozens of messages. None have been answered." "Then we send someone in person," Threneval said. "Someone they cannot ignore." They decided to send a delegation to find Ambassador Yoon. She had been humanity's junior attached before the withdrawal. Intelligence reports said she was now living on a human colony world called New Sol. If anyone could help them reconnect with humanity, surely it would be someone who had spent years working with the Council. The delegation arrived at New Sol after a 3-week journey. The colony was beautiful, with modern cities surrounded by green forests and blue oceans. The delegation was met at the spaceport by local security, who politely directed them to Ambassador Yoon's location. They found her at a school. She was teaching a class of young children about Earth history. The children looked up curiously as the alien delegation entered the classroom. Ambassador Yoon looked up from her desk and sighed. "Class dismissed for today," she told the children. "Read Chapter 7 for tomorrow." The children gathered their things and left, some of them staring at the strange aliens with wide eyes. Yoon stood and faced the delegation. She looked different from her diplomatic days. No formal suit. No carefully styled hair. Just simple clothes and a tired expression. "Ambassador Yoon," Threneval began, "we need your help. The galaxy needs you to return to service." "I am not an ambassador anymore," Yoon said. "I am a teacher. I teach children about history so they understand why we do not make the same mistakes their parents did." "But your experience, your knowledge," one delegate said. "You understand both humans and the Council. You can help us rebuild diplomatic relations." Yoon walked to the window and looked out at her students playing in the courtyard. "I spent 8 years trying to make you understand humans," she said quietly. "I wrote reports. I gave presentations. I explained our culture, our values, our needs. None of it mattered. You wanted us to be grateful for being allowed to speak. We were not partners. We were petitioners." "We made mistakes," Krell said. He had insisted on being part of the delegation. "But we can fix them. Come back. Help us fix them." "It is too late for that," Yoon said, turning to face them. "You do not want to fix mistakes. You want things to go back to how they were. You want humans to be quiet and cooperative again. You want us to absorb your insults and accept your dismissals. That version of humanity is gone. What do you want?" Vorthon asked desperately. "Money? Territory? Council positions?" "Name your price," Yoon laughed, but there was no humor in it. You still do not understand. We do not want anything from you. We are done wanting things from you. That is the point. But the violence, Threneville said. The instability. Your people are causing problems across the galaxy. Are we? Yoon asked. Or are we simply not solving your problems anymore? For 50 years, human diplomats worked endlessly to maintain peace. We mediated disputes. We offered compromises. We absorbed the blame for failures. You thought that was natural. You thought that was our place? Now we are not doing that work. And suddenly, there is instability. Maybe that tells you something about how much we were actually holding together. The delegation stood in silence. They had not considered that possibility. The Council needs humanity, Krell said finally. I am not ashamed to admit it. We need you at the table. Then you should have treated us like we mattered when we were there, Yoon said. You cannot ignore someone for decades and then expect them to come running when you need help. She walked back to her desk and began organizing papers. I have work to do. Security will show you back to your ship, please, Threneville said, and for the first time there was genuine pleading in his voice. What will it take? Yoon stopped organizing papers. She looked at the delegation, really looked at them, and saw fear. Good. They should be afraid. They had built a system that did not work, and now they were discovering the consequences. It will take you learning that respect is not something you grant when convenient, she said. It is something you give consistently, even when it is difficult. It will take you understanding that agreements mean nothing without enforcement. It will take you accepting that humanity is not interested in your approval anymore. We have built something new. With people who actually wanted us, that is what it will take. And I do not think you are capable of learning those lessons. The delegation left. Yoon watched their ship depart from her classroom window. She felt a small hand tug her sleeve. One of her students, a boy named Jinho, had stayed behind.
Ow.
Teacher Yoon, he asked, were those the people who were mean to us? Yoon knelt down to his level. Yes, she said. Those were the people who did not listen when we asked nicely. What happens now? Jinho asked. Now they learn to listen, Yoon said, or they do not. Either way, we will be fine. We do not need them anymore. Back on the council station, the delegation reported their failure. The chamber fell into despair. Some representatives argued for military action. Others suggested economic sanctions. A few proposed making dramatic concessions to humanity. Krell listened to it all and realized something terrible. The council had no power over humanity anymore. Military action would fail because human intelligence and technology had quietly surpassed council capabilities. Economic sanctions would not work because humanity had built alternative trade networks. Concessions were meaningless because humanity did not want to rejoin the council. The only power the council had ever held over humanity was humanity's own desire for acceptance. And that desire was gone. We have created something we cannot control, Krell said quietly. And we cannot understand why they do not fear us, an advisor whispered back, perhaps because they spent 50 years watching us, learning from us, and preparing for this moment. While we were laughing at them, they were studying us. We thought they were weak. They were just patient. Across the galaxy, Humanity's Independent Systems Coalition held its 15th session. Membership had grown to 93 species. Trade routes were secure. Disputes were resolved quickly. Security was maintained through mutual cooperation and actual consequences for violations, and the Galactic Council watched it all happen. Powerless to stop it, unable to compete with it, and finally beginning to understand what they had lost. 1 year after humanity's withdrawal, the Galactic Council was barely recognizable. Trade had collapsed between many former partners. Security incidents happened daily. Species that had relied on the Council's authority to maintain order found themselves dealing with problems they had forgotten how to handle. The bureaucracy that had once seemed powerful now seemed slow and useless. Chancellor Su-Jen sat in her office on Earth, reading reports from across the galaxy. The Independent Systems Coalition was thriving. 112 species now, growing every week. Not because humanity was forcing anyone to join, but because the alternative worked better than what the council offered. A message arrived on her secure terminal. It was from Krell. The message was short. Please. We need to talk. Not as counsel to humanity. As equals, Sujin considered deleting it. She had deleted 73 similar messages over the past year. But something in this one felt different. The word equals stood out. She sent a response. Send an official delegation to Earth. Real authority. Real willingness to change. Or do not waste our time. 3 weeks later, a council ship arrived at Earth. The delegation included Threneval, though he was no longer council speaker. That position had been dissolved in the chaos. Also present were Krell and representatives from 8 other major council species. They arrived without military escort, without demands, without the usual pageantry. They were met by Ambassador J1, the same man who had stood before the council chamber a year ago, presenting evidence that was ignored. He looked older, but calmer, more confident, Ambassador Jawan Threneval said. His mandibles no longer clicked dismissively. Thank you for agreeing to meet with us. I am meeting with you because my government ordered me to, Jawan said plainly. Not because I want to. Let us be honest about that from the beginning. The delegation was taken to a conference room overlooking the Pacific Ocean. The view was beautiful. Earth's blue waters stretching to the horizon. None of the delegates seemed to notice. They were too nervous. We are prepared to offer humanity full council membership, Threneval began. With voting rights, security guarantees, and reparations for previous incidents. Jawan shook his head. We are not interested in joining your council. Silence filled the room. Threneval's carapace seemed to dull even more. Then what do you want? What will it take? You are asking the wrong question, J1 said. You are still thinking about what you can give us to make us come back. You are not thinking about why we left. The problem was never about rights, or votes, or money. The problem was about respect. We respect you now, Vorthon said quickly. Everyone respects human capabilities after what you have shown. You respect our power, Jawan corrected. That is not the same as respecting us. You respect us now because you are afraid. Fear is not respect. Fear is just fear. Krell leaned forward. Then teach us, he said. If we do not understand, help us understand. J1 studied Krell's face. There was genuine sincerity there. Maybe you built a system where big species mattered and small species did not. You built a system where evidence did not matter if the right people did not want to see it. You built a system where agreements had no consequences. That system was broken. We are not interested in fixing it. We are interested in building something different. Your coalition, Threneval said. It is based on enforcement and consequences. Is that not just another form of tyranny? No, J1 said. It is based on actual agreements. When you sign a treaty with us, you know exactly what will happen if you violate it. There are no surprises, no committees, no tabling for later review. Just clear consequences that everyone agreed to in advance. That is not tyranny. That is honesty. But what about mercy? Another delegate asked. What about understanding special circumstances? We are very good at mercy, J1 said. We spent 50 years being merciful while you were not. The difference is that in our system, mercy is earned through good behavior, not assumed as a right. If you honor your agreements, we are very flexible. If you violate them, we respond immediately. It is very simple. Chancellor Sujin entered the room. She had been listening to the conversation through a monitor. The delegates stood respectfully. She gestured for them to sit. Let me be clear about something, Sujin said. We are not trying to destroy the Galactic Council. We do not care enough about the Council to want to destroy it. If your system works for you, keep it. But we will not rejoin it. We will not subject ourselves to a system that does not value us. Then what are we here for? Threneval asked. If you will not rejoin, why allow this meeting? Because Krell asked nicely, Sujin said, nodding toward the amphibian diplomat. And because there might be value in cooperation between separate equals, not you above us, not us above you, equals. She pulled up a holographic display showing a proposed framework. This is what we are willing to discuss. A liaison agreement between the Council and the Coalition. Separate entities. Different systems, but with communication channels and mutual respect. Krell studied the framework. It was nothing like he expected. The Council would have no authority over human space. Humans would have no authority over Council space. But there would be formal communication, trade agreements, and security cooperation where interests aligned. This is not what the Council is used to, Krell said. No, Sujin agreed. The Council is used to being in charge. This requires the Council to accept that some species are not under your authority. That is the hard part. The question is whether you can accept that. The delegates talked among themselves in low voices. Finally, Threnevel spoke. We need time to discuss this with the full Council. Take your time, Sujin said. We are not desperate. We are doing fine without you. This offer is for your benefit more than ours. If you can accept genuine equality, we can build something useful together. If you cannot, we will continue building our own systems. The delegation returned to Council space. 3 months of intense debate followed. Some Council members rejected the idea entirely. Others saw it as humiliating. But slowly, as more species quietly joined humanity's coalition, as more problems arose that the Council could not solve, the argument shifted. Krell made the final speech that changed minds. We have a choice, he told the Council. We can maintain our pride and watch the galaxy leave us behind. Or we can accept that we made mistakes and adapt to a new reality. Pride or survival. Choose. The vote was close, but it passed. The Council would negotiate with humanity as equals. 6 months after the delegation's visit to Earth, the first signing ceremony took place. It happened on a neutral station built specifically for this purpose, neither Council territory nor Coalition territory. New Ground Ambassador J1 represented humanity. Krell represented the Council, having been chosen specifically because of his honesty throughout the crisis. The agreement was called the Accord of Sovereign Systems. It recognized both the Council and the Coalition as separate but equal entities with their own rules, laws, and authorities. Young-hee watched from the observation deck. She had just graduated from the Diplomatic Academy. This was her first assignment, witnessing history being made. She stood next to retired Admiral Tae-yang, who had been invited as an honored guest. Is this really better, Young-hee asked, having 2 separate systems instead of one united galaxy? Admiral Tae-yang watched the signing ceremony through the window. It is honest, he said. The old system pretended to be united but was actually just big species controlling small species. This system admits that different groups have different needs and different values. That is more honest. But they only respect us now because they saw our military power, Young-hee said. Is that not just fear? Fear was the beginning, Tae-yang agreed. But respect has to start somewhere. They feared our military, and they noticed our intelligence networks. Then they saw our economic systems working better than theirs. Then they experienced our diplomatic consistency. Fear got their attention. Everything else earned their respect. Do you think it will last? Young-hee asked. Tang smiled slightly. That depends on whether both sides remember the lessons. We learned that you cannot force people to respect you. You can only walk away from those who do not and build something better. They learned that authority means nothing without voluntary cooperation. As long as both sides remember those lessons, yes, it will last. The signing ceremony concluded. Representatives from both sides shook hands, tentacles, claws, and other appendages. There were no grand speeches, no dramatic proclamations, just 2 entities agreeing to work together as equals. Krell found Jae-won after the ceremony. I want to apologize, he said. For all the years of dismissal, for all the ignored evidence, for all the suffering we could have prevented. Jae-won looked at him for a long moment. Apology noted, he said. But understand something. We are not doing this for closure. We are not doing this because we forgave you. We're doing this because it serves our interest to have stable neighbors. Your apology is appreciated but not required. That is fair, Krell said quietly. However, Jae-won continued, I will say this. You were the only one who consistently tried. You voted the right way, even when it was useless. You asked the hard questions, even when no one wanted to hear them. That matters. Not enough to erase the past, but enough to build a future. They shook hands, one human and one amphibian, representing two very different visions of how the galaxy should work. In the years that followed, the galaxy adapted to its new reality. The Council reformed its procedures, became more responsive, and learned to enforce its own agreements. The Coalition continued to grow, offering an alternative for species that wanted something different. Sometimes the two systems cooperated. Sometimes they competed. But they did so as equals. And humanity, the species that had been ignored for 50 years, had learned the most valuable lesson of all. Sometimes the best response to being disrespected is not anger or violence. Sometimes it is simply building something better and walking away. Let others come to you when they are ready to treat you properly. And if they never do, you will be fine anyway because you stopped needing their approval. The galaxy had learned to take humanity seriously. But more importantly, humanity had learned to take themselves seriously. And that made all the difference.